Hello, my name's Andrew Middleton, and I'm going to present to you about using social media to remain in good standing in the LinkedIn University. The notion of the LinkedIn University is really quite simple, that the use of portfolios by academics and by students is a powerful device to help us understand how to present ourselves professionally. So let's look at this one slide here. Let's look at the top of it. This gives us our focus for the LinkedIn University. You can see various logos there, and I'll briefly talk about one or two of them. But let's start with LinkedIn. LinkedIn is accepted, I think, as being the de facto tool for professionals, irrespective of what sector they are professional in. But it's certainly used by academics, and in terms of supporting student employability, it's also a really useful tool for students to become familiar with. And to a certain extent, there's a need for us as academics to fully understand what it can do so that we're able to model good practice. So in our project, the LinkedIn University, we've really been taking a look at this notion of presenting ourselves as professionals, whether those professionals are academic staff or whether they are our aspiring professionals, our students and our alumni. So alongside the LinkedIn University, the LinkedIn logo rather, there are some other logos. And I just want to pick up on those because even though the project we have is about LinkedIn, it's much more than that. It's really about how we present ourselves professionally. And there are other spaces we can use in terms of how we present ourselves. So on the left is the Google Plus logo, and that's there to represent the notion of the personal learning network. In terms of Google, that would be Google Plus circles, for example, self-constructed, self-defined circles of people who we value, whether that's informally as family and so forth, or circles which are very much constructed around our professional network. So that's the case here. It's our professional self-constructed networks that we shouldn't forget if we're thinking about presentation. We can also see Mendeley there. I wasn't sure about putting Mendeley at the top. But Mendeley, if you're familiar with it, it's a bibliographic tool. It's a place where we can collate and share and peer review articles and publications that we find particularly useful. And within Mendeley and similar tools, there is a group function. And so I think if we're looking at tools like Mendeley and Cloudworks, we might want to consider whether we are using those or can use those to help us present our professional identities and help us to form our professional identities and presence. There are two here that I think are really important. If you don't know about them, I strongly suggest you take a look at academia.edu and at ResearchGate. Because whilst LinkedIn is a powerful, professional, recognized social media tool, it is relatively general. Are there equivalent academically focused tools? And I think the answer has to be no, not really. But if you look at academia.edu and at ResearchGate, I think you'll start to recognize that these are social media tools in which we can exchange dimensions of our academic scholarly practice, and we can consider those spaces for sharing our papers and for discovering papers and presentations by others as being really useful in this concept of the presentation layer represented by this notion of the LinkedIn University. Okay, so I've talked about presentation layer. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about actually by establishing for ourselves a need to be present, we therefore need to feed that presence. And whether we're talking about ourselves as academics or our students and their personal development planning, having a concrete shop window in which we present ourselves in social media is really important in this day and age. So moving away from that driving presentation layer, what actually informs it? How do we get to the point of presenting ourselves in a very careful and obviously professional way. Let's look on the right-hand side of this screen now. Let's look at those silhouetted figures. Who's involved in this? Because we are talking about social media for learning in higher education. So on the right we can see peers. And peers is a strange word. We have to define that for ourselves. But we know who we identify with, who we aspire to be like, who we want to be part of, associated with. And so let's keep it loose for the moment, but you will have in your own mind a sense of who your peers are. Directly under that, we've got students, our students. What are our students doing in our professional space? Well, of course they're there. We're working together, we're all connected. And actually being on the web in a professional way is a way for us to model good practice, good scholarly practice, and indeed for us to learn from some of the things that our students are doing. I mean, how many of your students, for example, have got Facebook groups? You might not know what goes on there, but they've decided for themselves that that is a really powerful environment. So I do see this very much as a two-way benefit of recognizing students in our social media environment. Then the next one is a bit vague, it's public. Again, we define public for ourselves, but really the point here is that if we're out there, if we're in the social media environment as professionals, we should be aware that it's an open space by and large, and that people come across us, people that we don't know about necessarily and don't expect to come across us or be interested in us. So that notion of public here for me represents that uncertainty but really powerful opportunity that we have as academic professionals. Below public I've put alumni. Alumni are like students, aren't they? But there's something different about them. And again, it's a two-way difference. They have experienced our teaching. They have experienced our course, our university. They are now our representatives in their professional world. And we can actually connect with and learn from them. And we can encourage them to reflect back to us through social media, their experience of being a student and now their experience of being a professional. That's a really powerful connection that we're able to make fairly easily with tools like LinkedIn. Then we have collaborators. Until recently, it was quite difficult to find collaborators beyond the people who might be sitting in the same office as you. We can now connect to anyone in the world, those peers that we define for ourselves, who we find a connection with that is likely to develop our understanding and knowledge more generally. So the notion of collaboration is really important in this world of social media for learning in higher education. Under collaborators, I've put funders. If we are representing ourselves professionally, one of the main things in our mind will be the need to attract funding to support our research, to support our development, and to support our students. Those funders might be internal to our university, but more likely that they're going to be external. As our employers, our relationship with our employers is getting stronger and stronger in higher education. That notion of authentic learning now drawing much more upon ideas of placement and international connectivity and so forth. Okay, so there are some of the people that we're thinking about being within our social media for learning environment. Let's move to the left of the diagram now. Let's look at the bottom, inquire. I think inquire's a relatively useful idea here. It represents a lot of what we do in terms of research and scholarship, whether that's us or us supporting our students. We are connected to data, to information, to ideas, to people, and so the notion of inquiry-based learning and so forth, and problem-based learning, and much of what we do as academics is all so much more possible now that we are connected through social media. The notion of capture, these aren't sequential, but the notion of capture allows us to bring together and formulate some new conceptualization or presentation of what we've found, whether that's captured in our own talking as I'm doing now, or in making videos of work that we're doing in the lab or in the studio or even in the classroom or in the field. We can capture what it is that's important in our professional practice. And that relates closely to creativity, the way we decide to present whatever it is we are doing with different media in this day and age, using media that we've created, but media that students have created, and media that exists and has been created elsewhere. Then there's the notion of sharing what we create. That notion of sharing is very much about interactivity. It's not always about us making and giving out, or even taking. It is very much more of an interactive philosophy that we see supported by social media for learning in higher education. But we have to take a managed approach to all this. It can get really confusing. I mean, we have to, as professionals, start to develop our capabilities to curate and to form useful collections of materials, ideas, artifacts, papers, whatever it is that is catching our attention. Across the top, we've got this set of ideas about essentially, well, what are we up to? We're actors. We're connectors, we're reflectors. That is what we are as academics in the digital and social media age. We are constructing, we are interacting, and essentially we're always learning. So all of this then feeds up through the presentation layer into these portfolios of professional presence as represented by the notion of the LinkedIn University.